some of the stuff that I've read in the past in the 60s spy genre I've really enjoyed. John le Carre, Graham Greene, Ian Fleming with the James Bond novels, and those were really interesting to me. The one thing I didn't like about them was they were a little slower paced. So I liked some of the modern thrillers from today and the fast-paced way that the story moves. But I felt that in the 60s, the 60s spy thriller was not, was a little bit slower, a little more involved, a little more cerebral. So I kind of wanted to blend the two together. So the idea for Ed Maddux came from kind of a conglomeration of those characters, of somebody that can move fast, can do things quickly. There's a lot of action, but at the same time, there still is there's a little bit more espionage and trading and intelligence and that sort of thing, kind of blending the two together, but putting them in the 60s, putting them in that setting. So the idea for this Ed Maddux series came about as a result of a trip that I took in 2013 to Washington, D.C., where I was doing some research for another book called The Warren Emissions and James Flynn series. And I came across these papers from the 60s that were CIA operational papers. And from what I understand, they are the only CIA operational papers that are public. So it kind of gives you an idea when I started reading these papers about how we did things, how did we recruit spies and budgets, and where do we get the money for this, and who got paid what, and how did these things come about? How did this this whole plan come about? So there's one in particular that really struck me. It was called Katomic. And at the time, different letters meant different things, and they would stick them together and make these names for the different operations that they were doing. And this particular plan was about penetrating the KGB and the Russian embassy in Bonn, Germany. So after the war, Bonn became kind of this de facto capital of Germany. It wasn't anything in any official capacity, but it was where all the stuff went down. I read this story these CIA operational papers about how they kind of infiltrated. They were after this one particular spy, and what the CIA did, how they recruited this woman who was a housekeeper in this neighborhood, who just so happened to be the housekeeper for this particular KGB agent who was an embassy liaison for the Russians there. And then they also co-opted the local locksmith. And so one day they had the lady who was a housekeeper break her key off. Of course, when the embassy attaché or the KGB guy gets home, he calls the local locksmith. He doesn't look up and try to find the best price. He just finds the guy that's local. And of course, the guy that's local is on the CIA payroll. He makes a copy, gives to the CIA. The next day they go in and bug the guy's place. So it was little stories like that where I found out how they did things and what they did and who they recruited, and I found it very fascinating that they would take people like this, and a lot of times civilian assets. There were just people working normal jobs that would get transferred overseas, and before they would go, the CIA would approach them and say, "Hey, could you do something for us? We might need you to help us out here." And would recruit them to do certain things. So this series came out of an idea and somewhat related to some characters that I found in this cache of papers.